Welcome to the Green Urbanist, the podcast for urbanists fighting climate change. I'm Ross. Today's episode is an interview with Giulia Mori. Giulia is a senior energy and sustainability consultant with Tuffin Ferraby Taylor in London. One of her areas of expertise is well-being in the built environment, so the focus of our conversation is how architecture and urban design affects our health. Well-being is a huge topic. To keep this conversation to a reasonable length, we've chosen to focus on three topics: air quality, thermal comfort, and sedentary lifestyle. If you're unfamiliar with the term, thermal comfort is to do with how we experience temperature and the effect of this on our productivity and health. There are many more aspects of well-being that we didn't have time to cover. For instance, we didn't talk about nutrition, mental health, the importance of community, or biophilia, or innate connection with the natural world. If you enjoy this episode and you want to know more, maybe Giulia can come back on for another episode and we'll talk about these topics. Now, we are recording this in July of 2020. COVID-19 is still very much present in the world, so we do talk about infectious disease towards the end of the podcast. Finally, just a point on some terminology. Giulia mentions two things you might be unfamiliar with. These are the Well Building Standard and the Fitwell Standard. These are rating systems that you can follow when you're designing or retrofitting a building to make it as healthy as possible. A lot of what Giulia does is helping architects and developers to apply these standards to buildings so they can be certified under Well or Fitwell. We don't go into depth on the standards, but just be aware that they exist, as we do mention them a few times in passing. Okay, that's it. Here's my conversation with Giulia Mori. Hi Giulia, thanks for being on the podcast. How are you?
I'm good, Ross. Thank you for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here and have this interview.
Why don't you begin just by telling us a bit about who you are and your background?
Okay. So again, I'm Giulia Mori, and I graduated as an environmental architect in Italy. And then just after that, I moved to the UK to study in a master at UCL called the Environmental Design and Engineering. And since then, I've been working in the industry as a sustainability consultant. I have, in the meanwhile, in the last 4 or 5 years, achieved a number of accreditations, such as BREEAM and WELL, and I'm very eager to learn more and more. I'm still collaborating with UCL. I'm currently supporting as a tutor for dissertations or sometimes for course exams. And I also deliver a number of CPDs and presentation talking about well-being in the built environment and how this affects, resilience of building assets and sustainability.
And where are you working at the moment?
I'm currently a sustainability consultant at TFT, Tuffin Ferraby Taylor, which is property consultancy based in London, with offices all around the UK.
That's great. It sounds like you have a lot of hats and you do a lot of different kinds of work. What we want to talk about specifically today is about well-being in the built environment and within buildings. That seems to be a big part of your work. So maybe we can jump in, just ask, so what is well-being? Why is it important? And why should people listening be more aware of it?
So when we talk about health and well-being, we have to think that this is not just about the absence of a disease, but ultimately is the enjoyment of a productive life that brings us happiness and makes us feel, satisfied and happy with what we are doing. And this includes both physical well-being and mental well-being.
Okay.
And another thing that I'd like to bring to the table in this conversation is that when we talk about well-being focused design, we think about a human-centric design, which is slightly different to, when we talk about sustainability, because usually when we talk about sustainability, we refer to resource sustainability and how we treat the environment, what we take from the environment to build our buildings ultimately. While the well-being design, it's very human-focused. So how does a person live within a building? How is the building supporting this person's health? And personally, when it comes for me to talk to design teams or clients about this human-centric design, I always try to challenge them a little bit and remember that, for example, when we talk about an office building, let's say in London or wherever you want, there's always some stuff that works around the building, such as the front of house staff, so security, people that work in reception, and also back of house staff, so engineers, the facility manager, etc. And sometimes we tend to, forget about these people and how they spend so much time of their life in this building. And often, mostly in the back of house, people that work there don't have access to, basic things such as natural daylight. So sometimes I try to challenge, design teams and clients again to remember that these people will live and work in a building for 8 hours a day, every day. And it will be detrimental to their, both physical health and mental health if they don't have access to, a good daylight access or good indoor air quality, etc. So we have to think about different aspects of the building and try to focus on all the people that are going to use the building, not just the end users, but also the staff that makes the building run.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not just about the CEO having a well ventilated office or having full height windows. It's about everyone that has to use the building. Well, there's obviously a lot of aspects to this concept of well-being. So why don't we just start in a way a bit from the negative, which is, what are some of the ways that the built environment and buildings are harmful to us that we need to be aware of? And then after that we can talk about what do you do to improve well-being and to counter these things that are harmful to us.
Yes, definitely. This is starting from the harms of the built environment. We can, I think today, explore three different aspects of it. Of course, it's not just limited to these 3 points that I'm going to raise now. So the first one is air pollution, so outdoor air pollution that comes from factories, that comes from traffic, that comes from running buildings, such as using, your heating and cooling systems, your ventilation systems, etc. And then the second aspect to air quality is indoor air quality. So what comes from, for example, toxic materials that we install in our buildings. Sometimes we can still purchase furniture or building materials that have formaldehyde. That is not great to breathe when you go into a building, and other chemicals that I can't even mention now because their names are too complicated even for me to remember them. But you could still purchase certain materials that are not great for human health, mostly when installed again in an indoor environment, and then maybe there's not good air recirculation, etc., etc.
I think this is a really good point. We obviously focus on the air pollution caused by cars and the particulate matter and the nitrous oxide and things like that. But it's just because you're inside doesn't mean, I guess, that you're breathing healthy air, whether you're breathing clean air. And so there's also stuff in the furniture and in the paint and in all this kind of machinery. Printers are really bad as well.
Yeah, printers produce ozone when they work. So let's say a normal office printer will not harm you too much, but would be better to have it, for example, closed in a room that is dedicated just to the printer, or having an extract vent on top of the printer, so that helps a little bit, air recirculation, etc. And also another aspect to indoor air pollution is the number of people in a space. So when we breathe, we exhale CO2, which is ultimately not very good for us to breathe in big concentrations. It usually makes us very sleepy.
Yes,
so,
I've definitely experienced that.
Exactly. So when you are for example, in your office, when you used to wear in your office building,
remember those
days. And it was, 3 p.m. in the afternoon, quite warm day, all you and your colleagues all in the office, and at some point everybody feels a bit drowsy and sleepy. It could be because you had a heavy lunch, but also because you're all in the office, you've been there for like a number of hours now, and the CO2 levels have built up, and your air circulation system, your ventilation system is not getting rid of the CO2, so that makes all of you a bit drowsy. And then I think moving on to the second point of my list today is a little bit of climate change, which influence on the thermal comfort. So we know that climate change is happening and that we really have to slow it down. I know you're talking about this in other episodes of your podcast, so I'm not going to dwell on that. But in terms of how this affects our thermal comfort, we can think about the heat waves. For example, the heat wave that we had at the end of June here in the UK, and I think across the rest of Europe as well. Or stormy weather, and how the buildings react to these, exacerbated weather situations where we have a lot of rain or a lot of wind or very, very hot days. So this has an impact on our thermal comfort ultimately, mostly if our buildings are fully glazed. So this has an impact on, the people that use the building and the building services of the building, because to keep an indoor temperature that is comfortable for the people in the building, we have to run the systems very, very hardly, and that will ultimately consume them earlier than we thought when we installed them.
Yeah, I always laugh slightly when I see these beautiful skyscrapers fully glazed, and then on a sunny day all the blinds are down. And you think, well, what's the point of having fully glazed if it's too hot to even look out on a sunny day?
All the blinds are down and all the electric lights are on.
Yes.
So you're using your air conditioning at maximum, plus all your lights are on.
Yeah. It's kind of a failure of the basic concept of the building.
Yeah. So I am a great fan of bioclimatic architecture, which means, building buildings that are designed for the climate of the place where you're building them.
Okay, not just the ones that are fashionable or in the style of the moment.
At the same time, though, I appreciate that sometimes the industry doesn't go in that direction. So that we have to, input on the design of the buildings that are going to be fashionable, so that these are sustainable and healthy buildings. So there are ways around that, even in, kind of skyscrapers, maybe not fully glazed, but we always try to make the most of it, even when the client aspiration is different from, for example, a bioclimatic architecture building. And then I guess the last point, my third point today, is our new sedentary lifestyle. So I don't know if you recently heard this quote that is, sitting is the new smoking, and how, sitting down for 8 hours a day during, our working hours make us suffering from musculoskeletal diseases.
There's also an element of urban design here as well, because I think many people are in a situation where they leave their house, get in a car, drive to work, walk to their desk, sit down for 8 hours, leave the desk, go to their car, drive home, sit on the couch. And that's sort of an element of at least when we are going to the office, living in London, we can cycle. And even if we take the tube, we have to walk to the tube and walk from the tube station to the office. So there's that built-in exercise and built-in movement within the built environment.
Yeah, plus you have to stand up on the tube.
Exactly, always.
Yes, and all this, sedentary lifestyle is building up on our, strain on our muscles and our skeleton, plus in some occasions is supporting the growth of overweight and obesity in certain groups of the population. So people that don't have access to, for example, healthy food or healthy lifestyle are prone, to overweight and obesity.
Sure.
So,
and then I guess that's linked to heart disease, cancer, diabetes as well down the line. So it's all connected.
Exactly. So, and I think these are my 3 points for today: air pollution, thermal comfort with climate change in the picture, and the sedentary lifestyle.
3 really key things we need to be aware of. I think especially with the thermal comfort aspect, it must be so subjective of what different people find the best kind of temperature to work in and that kind of thing. So maybe we can talk next about, so we've got our three kind of core problems So what are some of the things you do to solve these problems, or to make sure that when you're designing a new building or refurbishing a building, that these things are sort of dealt with?
Yeah, so I know that this podcast doesn't focus only on building. So I think it would be very good for us to explore relatively urban strategies that we could deal with to support our health in the community and help ourselves and the rest of the population thrive with this kind of design. So going back to the air quality point, we're currently across the globe, and mostly here in the UK, also here in the UK, on a road to meet net zero carbon targets, and also to the electrification of the energy grid, which ultimately is phasing us out of fossil fuels to use more and more renewables. For example, gas hubs are going to become electric hubs, etc. So that we use less polluting energy sources on site, but we produce our energy off site and then we distribute it with an electric energy grid. So in this optic, we should be seeing a decrease in local environmental pollution from, for example, our gas boilers and the way we produce energy on site. And similarly, we should be seeing more renewables helping us producing the energy for our buildings on site. So both these things will help us reducing the local pollution. So the local, for example, particulate matter, PM2.5, PM10, etc. And the NOx, nitrogen dioxide.
Nitrogen dioxide. Which I mispronounced earlier, so I'm just acknowledging that.
And then we have, I think, another strategy from an urban point of view. It's privileging sustainable transportation. But we also have to think about the infrastructures that allow us to use this sustainable transportation. So it's not just about my employers providing me with a shower on site of my office and parking space in my office. I also need the infrastructures around my city to allow me to cycle safely to my office. And also having the other people in the road with me that are not maybe driving a bicycle or an electric scooter to be aware of me as a different traveler. Then when it comes to indoor quality, key to this is procurement of the materials that are not toxic, procurement of sustainable materials. So it's key for us to understand that a material that has toxicants in it, such as formaldehyde or nasty glues, nasty adhesives, etc., will not be easy to recycle or to reuse. So that kind of folds out the idea of circular economy, which is becoming more and more important and popular in the sustainability community. So the idea that you don't extract a material, use it, and then throw it away, but that you reuse it as many times as possible so that you reduce the impact on your environmental resources.
So this is one of the ways that well-being is synergistic with sustainability?
Yeah, I think we can talk about this later though.
Yeah, sure. I think this is a big topic, but that's a really good first example.
And then following on the indoor air pollution topic, we also have to make sure that our spaces don't overcrowd, mostly now in a time of COVID. But as I said before, CO2 can be a bit detrimental for people productivities and people health. So making sure that there are not too many people in the same space and the air quality stays fresh and stay very, very good, very high all the time is very important. So it's either reducing or having the right amount of people in the space or having higher ventilation rates. And then I think my last point on this is to design and have a good air filtration that is designed according to the outdoor air pollution. So if we know that the outdoor air pollution is quite high, for example, you are located on a very busy road that has always traffic on it, etc., you might need a bit of a finer filtration.
Okay, and what about thermal comfort?
As I was mentioning earlier, ultimately, a bioclimatic architecture would be, the best solution from both a sustainable and a healthy design perspective. But again, as this is not always the case, when we design a building, when we're commissioned to design a building, etc., we have to think about thermal comfort as a very complex issue, because as you mentioned quickly earlier, thermal comfort is very subjective. It really depends from, for example, what you're wearing when you are in a space, what you had for lunch or for breakfast. Sometimes your gender can influence that. Usually women feel colder in a space than men do. And a whole range of other, variables could be taken into account from this point of view. So it's a very complicated issue, and you really cannot really imagine to design a building that meets 100% satisfaction from a thermal comfort point of view, because people will always, be a bit colder or a bit hotter than they should, that they feel they should be in a space. So the best way to design thermal comfort is to make sure that when you run, for example, a thermal comfort modeling, that kind of gives you an idea of how the building will perform with a number of people in the building, with the equipment that you would expect being in the building, computers, printers, etc. And in this way, you can modify your design to make sure you have the right systems installed in terms of thermal comfort. So
it seems like it's quite a technical exercise. You can sort of run a computer model of your building design with all your systems, and you can figure out whether the thermal comfort will be adequate or whether you have certain hotspots or certain problem areas.
Yeah, that's correct. And you will see if some areas of the building are overheating, and you can, for example, add more windows to have more, natural ventilation in the space. Or if you're running a mechanical ventilated space, you can have higher ventilation rates or cooler temperature ranges, etc. So yeah, as you said, it's relatively technical, but technology today, it's supporting us a lot from this point of view, and it's telling us where the building might fail a thermal comfort exercise, and how we can adjust that for optimal comfort.
And I guess from a sustainability point of view, it pays to get the basic design of the building right, to get that sort of natural cooling and natural ventilation correct, rather than trying to retrofit it with like air conditioning afterwards.
Yeah, it's correct. So even if you're, for example, designing a glazed skyscraper, there are ways, for example, to have external shadings that will help your space not get overheated during very, very sunny days. So there are strategies around that too, to support both the well-being and the sustainability side of things.
So the last topic we were going to discuss was the sedentary behavior. So what are some solutions around that from your perspective?
Yeah, so as I was mentioning earlier, for the air quality issue, for us to support active transportation, so from both a facility and an infrastructural point of view, it is very important, because if we, even in a post-pandemic perspective, supporting people, feeling safer if they cycle to work, for example, or if they can work to walk, etc., will be very, very important. And this will also support us being more active, have an active lifestyle, and avoid being sedentary and having all those issues that we mentioned earlier. Then we also, when we think about the building itself, we can also design it to support active circulation within the building. So with, for example, motivational signs on the lift that reminds you that the building has stairs. So maybe if your office or if your classroom is only on the second floor, maybe you could walk it up and down instead of calling the lift, etc. So sometimes it's just about reminding people that, the opportunity for them to move within the building are there. It's just that sometimes they're a bit hidden. Sometimes stairs are hidden from for a security point of view, or because we're only using them for fire safety. So they have to be locked in a certain way. So we have to remind people, if it's possible, that they can use alternative route that is not escalator or elevator. Again, if possible. Maybe not everybody can, or if your office is on the 17th floor, I'm not recommending you that you run up and down the stairs all the time. But there is a middle way there.
I've heard of a design solution called the irresistible staircase, which is where you design the staircase to basically have windows and have a view and be sort of very, maybe at the front of the building or very obvious. So people walk in, they'll naturally go to the stairs, and they might actually even enjoy walking up them because then they get a view as they get higher up, whereas the elevator is then hidden slightly.
Yeah, there is a whole range of things that can be done to support people using the stairs, such as having music on the stairs, or having what the well-building standard calls gamification. So having a system that makes you go up the stairs, for example, having the count of the calories for every step, or having the use of colors, or have, some little game that's up to, the designer creativity to create. And that is, it's something that has, very positive results once it's in place.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's sort of little ways to nudge people towards healthier behavior.
Yeah. And then I guess the latest one, which is more, it's also supporting, the mental health side of things, is having a good work-life balance or study-life balance when it comes to an active lifestyle. Because if I don't allow myself having enough time, or if I'm working too late, working the weekends, etc., that is not supporting me being active, because I'm always, sitting down, studying or working, and I'm not finding time for myself, etc. So this is something that we all have to be mindful of. And for let's say from a certification point of view, when it comes to well-being, it's something that is down to the employer to provide to its employees.
Company culture.
Exactly. And also education around fitness and mental health, and how being active supports your mental health as well and makes you less stressed and more productive, etc.
So we've been talking a lot about, office buildings and workplaces, but I guess a lot of these principles are applicable to residential buildings and other kind of uses as well.
Yeah, that is correct. Sorry if I mention offices a lot. That is the majority of what I do, but this is also applicable to residential buildings in a different way. So, for example, again, from an air quality point of view, I think I mentioned mechanical ventilation quite a lot, while for residential building, we would usually have natural ventilation. So allowing you to open the windows as and when you want and you need, etc. But yeah, there the other considerations that we went through, so thermal comfort, the sustainable transportation, the active lifestyle, etc., are definitely applicable to residential uses, education uses, leisure, etc., etc.
There's some key things that local authorities could have in their plans. Like, for instance, the new London plan says that you shouldn't have any single aspect north-facing residential units. And also a lot of local authorities are really, always pushing for outdoor amenity space. So even if you're in a high-rise, giving people balconies or a roof terrace or something like that is obviously really key for your mental well-being and physical health as well.
Yeah, as you mentioned just now, access to daylight and access to correct lighting level is paramount for our health and well-being, because daylight and also electric lighting, when it comes to that, is what is triggering our circadian rhythm, so our sleep-wake cycle during the day. So having, for example, in our offices, in our schools, a relatively bluish light or access to good daylight make us more active during the day. And then in the house, having a warmer shade for our electric light will support us phasing out to sleep. And for example, using mobiles that don't have a blue light filter, or TVs or computer that don't have a blue light filter just before sleeping, disrupts our sleep and is not supporting, our well-being. So a lot of this comes to, the design of the light that we have in the building, having enough access to daylight and to outdoor views, etc. But also comes to the devices that we're using on a daily basis.
Yeah, it seems in a way that the more technologically advanced we become, the sort of more problems we create for ourselves. So we get further away from just the basics that we need in nature. So we've mentioned a lot during this, that we are recording this during the lockdown, the COVID-19 pandemic, still very much present in the world. And I guess we can't talk about well-being without talking about this. I guess infectious disease and pandemics were not something you probably thought about much in before March or February of this year when you were designing buildings. But how is that going to change now?
So that is partially correct, because when it comes to designing for well-being, we mostly use certifications such as the Well-Building Standard or Fitwel, and these mention infectious diseases to an extent. But at the same time now, both Fitwel and Well are evolving their standards and are also preparing new ratings. For example, IWBI, which is the institution that is responsible for Well, has just at the end of June released a new rating, which is COVID specific, so infectious diseases specific. And the same is happening for Fitwel. A few months down the line, it's probably going to happen, I would imagine, towards the end of summer. And what is happening in this specific ratings created now because of the pandemic is still focusing a lot on air quality of our buildings and how air quality and water quality are influencing our health every day. But they're also focusing a lot on emergency preparedness. So things like having an emergency preparedness plan. So for instance, what happens if we have a second wave of COVID later on during the year or maybe in the future? So having these plans from a company point of view or maybe school point of view laid down so that you know what happens if we have to lock down again. Making sure that again I'm using the office as an example because I found it relatively easy from this point of view, but having plans so that all your employees are given a laptop or computers so that they can work remotely, they have access to internet infrastructures, etc. So having this kind of emergency preparedness plan will really help. And also have having on-site emergency equipment such as hand sanitizer, PPE. For example, in my company, we often go on site, construction site, so we already have a range of PPEs from helmet and boots, etc. But we will now also need to wear certain levels of filtration mask, etc. So allowing your employees to be able to use company gloves or mask have been accessible for all the employees. It's something that will support the health and well-being of the people working for you. And then another really important focus from this point of view is cleanliness. Both emergency preparedness and cleanliness were already part of the standards. It's just that now they've been improved. Let's say the requirements have been improved. So we know that cleaning our hands or also cleaning the spaces where we live reduces the spread of infectious diseases. So this is a key in health and well-being environment at the moment. Yeah, so after emergency preparedness and cleanliness, we also have to, again, mention air quality, indoor air quality, and how we're making sure that the air stays clean and fresh and that it is not recycled, etc. Or if it is recycled, it's filtered in a certain way so that the viruses are filtered out, etc. Because COVID is ultimately airborne. Usually the ventilation systems that we have in place in certain levels of buildings should be able to, maybe increase the ventilation rates so that there is more fresh air flushed in the building during the day. Or if you have a naturally ventilated building, you should be reminded to open the windows a bit more often. And then I think the last one is is what is usually called destination control and space design. So, for example, one of the biggest problems at the moment is how we make sure that lifts don't overcrowd. So, and also how do we make sure that people don't touch the buttons, all the buttons in the lift? Or
take the stairs, people.
Exactly, take the stairs. But again, if you're working on the 17th floor, maybe you can't take the stairs. Or if you're a person with impaired mobility or with any kind of disability, maybe you need to take the lift. So what we have to make sure is that there is a destination control system. So you, instead of pushing the buttons, keeping the door open, etc., you basically book the lift when you check in the building, because your identity card knows where you have to go.
Right. Very good.
Or another way to do this is booking, for example, meeting rooms, or making sure that instead of using hot desking, you're keeping your station as it is, or you try to avoid different people using the same desk station within the same day, so that at least at night the desks are cleaned and someone else can use the desk tomorrow.
Yeah, many companies have moved towards a hot desking because it makes better use of space, and obviously they can have smaller offices. But it's interesting that one of the unforeseen risks is that then you may have people sharing a lot more surfaces than you might like. Although now that working from home has become more normal, it sort of means, in a way, hot desking might become more and more common. So I think having these sort of plans in place and sort of having an idea of how can you do this safely is really important.
Yeah, I agree. I really don't think that COVID will be detrimental for hot desking. We would probably use it a bit differently from what we were used to use it earlier. So again, as I said, instead of more people sharing the same desk or the same platform during the same day, hot desking will probably be allowed on different days. So if I use desk A today, you can use the same desk tomorrow.
Okay.
But maybe we will not use the same desk during the same day.
Sure. So it sounds like in a way, there's nothing too groundbreaking here. It's really just about being prepared. Now we know what can go wrong. We've learned lessons from the last few months. And now it's really about when this happens again, whenever that will be, we need to be prepared for it, and things should hopefully go a lot smoother the next time. So we mentioned a bit earlier about there's some ways that well-being synergizes with the sustainability concepts. As you said, we're moving towards zero carbon. So what are some of the ways that these work well together, and what are some of the ways that they diverge?
So I think starting, as we did at the beginning, with the problems that comes when we talk about sustainability and well-being, I would mention two of this. The first one is waste, and the second one is energy consumption. So one of the biggest topics and themes of sustainability is reducing waste, making sure that none of our waste goes to landfill. And mostly now with this pandemic, we are probably seeing an increase of surgical masks and gloves and disposable health equipment that is going to waste. And this is what we call operational waste, as opposed to construction or demolition waste in the built environment. So the use of single-use plastic or single-use, emergency equipment is definitely having an impact on our operational waste. And this is something that is not very sustainable. But at the same time, at the moment, the priority is saving lives and making sure that we defeat this disease. So is understandable at the moment. And I think the way we can look at it in the future is to make sure that we find a way to be able to reuse this equipment in a safe way, so that it's still healthy and is still protecting us. And the second point that I was raising is the energy consumption. So I think I mentioned mechanical ventilation and indoor air quality a high number of times during this podcast, and that comes with an associated energy consumption. So if you have a ventilation system in your building, that is consuming energy to be operating. So the more we need to use it, the more our energy bill goes up at the end of the month. So this is not very sustainable, and this is what in the sustainability community is advocated as a problem when it comes to well-being, because we are trying to make our buildings running net zero carbon, but then at the same time to make sure that we're healthy in the building. Many of the new guidelines and best practice advices during this pandemic is to flush in more air in mechanical ventilated systems. So this will require more energy than we used to use. And this will have an environmental impact associated with it. So again, we have to consider this in perspective, because we have to make sure that our buildings are a healthy place for us to go and use. So mostly now when it comes to health, we have to make sure that we support our health and that we're protecting the people using the buildings. So it's very important that even if this is coming with an associated energy consumption, we try to either offset it or install in more efficient systems or using renewables, etc., so that we try not to have too much of an impact on using fossil fuels, etc.
So it sounds like in general they align, sustainability and well-being align quite well, but there's a few key areas where a sort of decision needs to be made, weighing up which one you sort of give priority to.
Yeah, exactly. But as I said before, when it comes to materials and procurement, they really go hand in hand. So if you're procuring a healthy material, it's very likely that is going to be a great material from a sustainable point of view, because you will be able to reuse it or recycle it quite easily. And also the procurement routes required by both sustainability and well-being are again going hand in hand. So it's great to make sure that our resources are not overused or wasted when we're designing for both well-being and sustainability.
Yeah, and also the sustainable transport element, as we said before. Walking, cycling, taking public transport even, it's probably healthier, well, certainly is healthier than driving a car all the time, and also good for the environment as well. So that's a really obvious one.
Exactly.
Just to finish up, my understanding of well-being in the built environment is that it's becoming more and more popular with particular landowners and developers, because it gives them a unique selling point for their building and their development. But it's still, apart from the few measures that I mentioned earlier about north-facing units having adequate daylight, overshadowing, things like that in residential buildings, at the moment there isn't too much within the planning system to sort of get developers and get architects to do this as standard. So what are your thoughts on that?
So this is a very good point, and this is what I usually try again to challenge the audience with when I'm giving a presentation. And I think in the last few years, so let's say that the well-being community and the whole well-being movement is relatively young compared to the sustainability movement. And the planning system is slowly getting to know and appreciate and embed these strategies and these principles within their planning system. So for example, the New London Plan is embedding well-being requirements within the policies. And this is a very, very great news from our perspective, because we know that we will have to demonstrate how we are
meeting those policies.
Exactly, and how our buildings are designed for humans, for occupiers. And at the same time, other local authorities within the UK are starting mentioning well-being in their policies, and this is great, as we see that the focus on well-being is growing from this point of view. But at the same time, it's still not a requirement. So none of the planning authorities within the UK are asking you, for example, to deliver a building to a Fitwel standard or a well building standard. And I don't think that is always the right route to go for. A certification is not always the solution, but making sure that you embed the principles of well-being within your development from a community level and a building level is very important. So I'm sure we will see more and more planning authorities embedding these themes within their requirements.
Fantastic. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ross. It was great to be here.